There's a moment that every man faces in his life, a moment that quietly defines who he really is. It doesn't happen under bright lights or loud applause. It happens in silence. Maybe she looks at you differently. Maybe she stops listening when you speak. Maybe she starts pulling away, not because she doesn't see you, but because she stopped respecting you. And the truth that stings the most is this. It wasn't one big mistake that changed how she saw you. It was the small things, the way you react, the way you folded, when you should have stood firm, the way you gave your power away, without even realizing it. Respect. That's the word men chase, but rarely understand. You can buy attraction. You can demand attention. But respect, that's earned in silence. It's not in how loud you talk, how much money you make, or how tough you act. Respect is felt in how you carry yourself when no one's watching. See, every woman on this planet has an instinct. She can sense strength, not the kind that flexes, but the kind that stands still when everything else is falling apart. She can sense when you're grounded, when your words mean something, when your energy commands peace instead of chaos. You don't have to tell her you're powerful. She'll feel it. You don't have to tell her you're confident. She'll see it in the way you move, the way you look her in the eyes, the way you hold your own ground even when things don't go your way. But here's where most men lose it. They confuse attention with respect. They think the louder they get, the more they'll be noticed. They think if they chase hard enough, she'll value them. They think if they fix, please, or perform, they'll earn her love. But you can't negotiate respect. You can only live it. Because a woman doesn't respect a man who bends just to be liked. She respects a man who can say, "This is who I am. I don't need to prove it to you." There's a quiet kind of power that comes from self-control. When you stop reacting to everything. When you stop trying to prove your worth. When you stop giving energy to things beneath your purpose. That's when your presence changes. You move differently. You speak differently. You stop chasing validation because you realize the man who respects himself never has to demand respect from anyone else. It comes to him naturally. Every time you compromise your values just to be accepted, you lose a piece of your respect. Every time you silence your boundaries to keep someone happy, you send a message, not to her but to yourself, that your voice doesn't matter. And if you don't respect your own voice, why would she? Women respect men who are certain, not arrogant, but grounded. Men who can handle rejection without losing composure. Men who can be kind without being weak. Men who can protect their peace without needing to dominate. That's the paradox of real strength. It's both calm and unshakable. The truth is, respect isn't about what she thinks of you. It's about what you think of yourself when no one's around. It's about how you show up in your own life, your discipline, your consistency, your purpose, your emotional control. A woman can only respect what she recognizes as strong, and strength is not noise, it's presence. So the question isn't, do women respect me? The real question is, do I live in a way that deserves respect? Because the kind of man a woman truly respects, he doesn't have to convince her. His actions speak louder than words. His integrity commands it. His composure earns it. His purpose sustains it. Most men are trying to win affection. Few are building respect. And the difference between the two, affection fades when things get hard. Respect endures. Respect stays when emotion cools. Respect is what makes her look at you not just with love, but with admiration. If you want to be that kind of man, the one she respects even in silence, the one she stands beside when life tests you, then this message is for you. Because it's not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before you started apologizing for your strength. The kind of man a woman truly respects isn't built overnight. He's built in the moments when no one claps, when no one believes, when he decides he doesn't need to be liked, he just needs to be real. And once you become that man, you stop chasing respect because it starts chasing you. There's a kind of man who doesn't need to say much, yet when he walks into a room, everyone feels his presence. He's not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the one demanding attention. But something about him radiates certainty. His posture, his energy, his eyes, they all speak the same language. Control. He doesn't control others. He controls himself. And that right there is what makes him powerful. Because when a man can command his own emotions, his own reactions, his own energy, he becomes the kind of man that others, especially women, instinctively respect. Inner stability is not about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally disciplined. It's not about never feeling anger, disappointment, or fear. It's about mastering those feelings so they don't master you. Most men never learn that. They think strength is about force, about dominance, about showing power outwardly. But the truth is, the strongest man in any room is the one who doesn't need to prove it. A man who controls himself is a man who understands restraint. When everyone else is losing their composure, he stays calm. When someone disrespects him, he doesn't react impulsively. He responds with precision. That doesn't mean he tolerates disrespect. It means he refuses to let someone else dictate his emotional state. That's leadership. That's composure. That's what women recognize as real power, not because he's cold, but because he's centered. Women can sense emotional instability faster than words can reveal it. It's in how a man handles rejection, criticism, or confrontation. Does he crumble? Does he lash out? Does he become defensive or desperate? A man who is emotionally unstable is unpredictable, and unpredictability doesn't inspire respect. It creates distance. But when a man is steady, consistent, and grounded, he becomes a source of safety. He becomes someone people, not just women, trust, because stability is strength. Inner control isn't built overnight. It's forged in silence. It's born from all the times you wanted to explode, but didn't. From all the moments you wanted to prove someone wrong, but instead chose peace over ego. From all the times you walked away from drama that tried to bait you into chaos. That kind of self-control is what separates men who are reactive from men who are powerful. You can tell a lot about a man by what it takes to provoke him. If a few words can make you lose your temper, you're not in control. You're being controlled. If a look, a text, or a rejection can throw you off balance, then your emotions still belong to someone else. But when you've trained yourself to remain steady, to breathe, to assess, to stay calm even in chaos, you've entered a rare class of strength. That's the kind of strength women respect. Because a woman's instinct seeks stability. She wants to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. When you're calm, she feels grounded. When you're composed, she feels secure. But when you're reactive, defensive, or inconsistent, she feels unsafe, not because you're dangerous, but because she can't trust your energy. Women don't follow chaos. They follow clarity. The world constantly tests a man's control. People will push your buttons. Situations will test your patience, and life will throw you off track just to see what you do. Most men react, few respond. But the man who has mastered himself doesn't let temporary emotion destroy permanent peace. He knows that composure under pressure is not weakness, it's wisdom. Because the man who can't control his emotions will always be controlled by the person who can trigger them. Inner stability gives you presence. It changes how people listen when you speak. When you're calm, your words carry more weight. When you're centered, your silence says more than anger ever could. You stop chasing respect because people give it to you naturally. You stop needing validation because your confidence no longer depends on how others treat you. You start living from purpose, not emotion. This kind of control doesn't make you distant. It makes you dependable. A woman will respect a man who can face conflict without raising his voice, who can hear hard truths without becoming defensive, who can express disappointment without disrespect. That's emotional maturity. That's power with grace. Being stable doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It means you channel them. You can be passionate without being impulsive. You can be assertive without being aggressive. You can be vulnerable without being weak. Because when you understand your emotions, you don't fear them. And when you don't fear them, no one can use them against you. A man who controls himself doesn't let rejection destroy his confidence. He doesn't let failure define his identity. He doesn't let temporary setbacks make him forget his worth. He understands that calm is not the absence of struggle, it's the mastery of response. He trusts himself enough to stay composed when others panic. That kind of confidence can't be faked. It's felt. And make no mistake, people feel it. They feel it in the way you handle yourself when things go wrong, in the way you listen more than you speak, in the way you don't get pulled into emotional games. That's when a woman looks at you differently, not because you're trying to impress her, but because she realizes she can't shake your foundation. You're not moved by mood swings, tests, or mind games. You're anchored. You don't chase the storm. You become the calm within it. In a world full of noise, a man who's calm commands attention, because peace is rare. Focus is rare. Control is rare. Everyone's reacting to everything. Headlines, opinions, emotions. But the man who remains still, who doesn't let the world dictate his state, becomes magnetic. You can't fake that kind of energy. It's built from self-awareness, discipline, and purpose. Women respect that because it signals something ancient: safety, strength, and leadership. It says, I can handle pressure. I can protect peace. I can lead myself. And a man who can lead himself can lead anything. A relationship, a team, a vision. So if you want to be respected, stop trying to control others. Start controlling yourself. Control your emotions, your impulses, your time, your reactions. Because when you master your inner world, your outer world bends to match it. The man who controls himself controls the room, not by force, not by fear, but by presence. Because true power doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand still. And when you reach that level of self-mastery, you don't just earn respect, you embody it. There's a fine line between love and approval, and most men cross it without even realizing it. They mistake attention for affection, validation for connection, and acceptance for respect. They think that if they give more, do more, or chase harder, they'll finally be seen as worthy. But the truth is, every time a man bends his standards just to be accepted, he loses a piece of his power. Respect isn't built by pleasing. It's built by boundaries. The man who doesn't chase approval operates differently. He doesn't move from insecurity. He moves from principle. He understands that his time, his presence, and his attention are valuable. He doesn't hand them out, hoping someone will like him more. He gives them where they're earned, where there's mutual respect, not emotional dependency. That's the difference between a boy looking for validation and a man living with purpose. The truth is, approval is an addiction. It feels good in the moment, the compliment, the validation, the attention. It feeds the ego, but it starves the soul. Because every time you need someone else to tell you you're enough, you give away a little bit of your control. You start molding yourself into what they want, not who you are. And the more you perform for approval, the less you recognize yourself in the mirror. Boundaries are the antidote. They are not walls to keep people out. They are gates that decide who gets in. They protect your time, your peace, your energy, and your sense of self. A man with boundaries knows who he is and what he stands for. He doesn't beg for love because he understands that real love requires respect, and respect cannot exist without limits. The man who doesn't chase approval is not cold. He's clear. He's not arrogant. He's self-assured. He doesn't beg people to stay because he's not afraid to be alone. He knows solitude is better than servitude. And a man who can be alone is a man who can't be manipulated. When you chase approval, you put yourself beneath the other person. You start operating from a place of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being alone. You say yes when you mean no. You laugh when you're uncomfortable. You give second chances to people who've already shown you their true colors. And all for what? To keep someone who doesn't value you. To be seen as the nice guy. But here's the truth that most men don't want to face. Being liked is cheap. Being respected is expensive. It costs you comfort, people-pleasing, and sometimes even relationships. but it's the only way to live free. Because when you stop begging for approval, you start earning respect from others and from yourself. A man with boundaries doesn't argue his worth. He doesn't explain why he deserves respect. He simply lives in a way that commands it. His no carries more power than his yes. Why? Because his decisions are rooted in principle, not emotion. He doesn't compromise his values to be liked. He doesn't stay silent when something crosses the line. He doesn't tolerate what doesn't align, and that makes him rare. Women respect that, not because they want a man who's rigid or distant, but because they can sense when a man knows himself. When a man's boundaries are strong, it communicates self-respect. It says, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to be honest with you. It's not the boundary itself that earns respect, it's the strength it takes to enforce it. Every time you hold a boundary, you send a message to others and to yourself. You remind yourself that your energy is sacred, that your peace is worth protecting, that your voice matters. And when you do that consistently, people begin to treat you differently. They might resist at first. Test your limits, challenge your stance, but the longer you stand firm, the clearer your worth becomes. A man who chases approval gives away his authority. He's always performing, always seeking reassurance, always trying to keep the peace, even when it means losing himself. But the man who stands on principle doesn't perform, he leads. He doesn't chase, he attracts. He doesn't explain, he demonstrates. And that shift changes everything. The truth is, people don't respect what comes too easily. They respect what's earned. When you stop chasing, you force others to evaluate what you bring to the table. When you stop overgiving, they realize your value wasn't in what you did for them. It was in who you were all along. And that realization hits differently. Boundaries create polarity. They create tension. They draw a line between chaos and calm, between uncertainty and clarity. And in that line lies respect. A woman may not always agree with your boundaries, but she will respect them because they signal something rare. Conviction. You see, the world is full of men who bend, but very few who stand. When you stand, people might call you difficult, detached, or even cold. Let them. Because those labels usually come from people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They don't want you strong, they want you soft. They don't want you assertive, they want you agreeable. But you can't lead from a place of agreement. You lead from authenticity, and authenticity demands boundaries. It means you'll lose people who only valued your compliance. But that's not loss, that's alignment. Because every person who leaves when you enforce your standards is making room for someone who respects them. Being a man of boundaries doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring with direction. You give your time to people who value it. You give your heart to those who honor it. You give your energy to things that build, not drain. That's power. That's control. And women, they notice that. They notice the man who can say no without guilt. The man who doesn't over-explain. The man who isn't afraid of silence. They notice the man who doesn't chase but invites. Who doesn't compete but leads. Because that's the kind of man who carries himself like he's already enough. Not because someone told him so, but because he decided it. If you want to be respected, stop begging for attention. Stop auditioning for love. Stop letting people cross your boundaries because you're afraid of losing them. You don't lose real people when you stand firm. You only lose the ones who are using you. The man who doesn't chase approval doesn't need to convince anyone of his worth. His actions, his peace, and his standards do it for him. He's the man who walks away from chaos with calm, who doesn't need to prove his point to feel powerful. He's not driven by fear, but by purpose. And that's the kind of man women respect. Not because he demands it, but because he embodies it. The man who doesn't beg to be chosen, because he's already chosen himself. The man who doesn't lower his standards to fit in, because he was never meant to blend in. When you stop chasing approval, you stop shrinking. And when you stop shrinking, you finally stand tall enough for respect to meet you eye to eye. Every great man in history, the kind of man remembered long after his time, had one thing in common: purpose. He knew where he was going. He didn't wait for the world to hand him direction, he created it. He didn't live to impress people or earn their approval. He lived for something larger than himself. That's what gave his life meaning, clarity, and focus, and that's exactly what modern men are losing. Not because they lack strength or intelligence, but because they've forgotten their mission. When a man has no purpose, he becomes restless. He starts seeking validation to fill the emptiness. He becomes addicted to being liked, to being noticed, to being accepted. His life becomes a performance instead of a pursuit. He's always adjusting, always adapting, always chasing approval from people who don't even know who they are. And nothing drains masculine energy faster than that. A man who's forgotten why he's here. A man without purpose will always look for direction in someone else. A woman, a job, a friend group, a social trend. But a man with purpose doesn't follow. He leads. He doesn't need applause to know he's doing the right thing. His fulfillment comes from progress, from discipline, from seeing a vision come to life. He knows that the mission comes before validation. Because when you live for validation, you become a puppet to opinion. But when you live for purpose, you become unshakable. Purpose is not just about career or success. It's not about how much money you make or how busy you stay. Purpose is about alignment, knowing what you stand for, what you're building, and what you refuse to compromise. It's about living your life with direction and conviction, even when nobody understands it. Because real purpose doesn't need to be popular, it just needs to be true. When a man finds his mission, he changes. His energy becomes different. His eyes have focus, his actions have weight. He stops wasting time on petty drama because he's too focused on progress. He stops needing validation because he's too invested in creation. And that shift, that quiet sense of direction, is magnetic. Women feel it. The world feels it. Because there's nothing more powerful than a man who knows why he wakes up every morning. Purpose gives you posture. It keeps you centered when life tries to pull you off course. It protects you from emotional manipulation because you can't be easily swayed when you already have a direction. The man with purpose doesn't crumble when criticized because he's not living for approval. He's living for impact. And that's what commands respect, not the noise you make, but the purpose you serve. When a man lacks purpose, everything shakes. His relationships, his emotions, his confidence, all become unstable. Because without a mission, there's no anchor. He becomes reactive, chasing short-term pleasure instead of long-term meaning. He gets lost in distractions. Endless scrolling, empty validation, chasing women, chasing recognition. But here's the truth. A man who chases everything loses everything. A man who chases purpose attracts everything. Women can sense that difference. They can feel when a man is grounded in something bigger than himself. When he has a mission, she knows he's not looking to her to define him. That's what earns respect. Because a woman doesn't want to complete you. She wants to complement you. She doesn't want to carry your purpose, she wants to witness it. And she can't do that if you're still waiting for validation to tell you who you are. A man on a mission doesn't ask, do they approve of me? He asks, am I aligned with my vision? He doesn't measure his success by likes or praise. He measures it by growth, consistency, and integrity. And that mindset creates emotional freedom. You stop needing external permission to move forward. You stop chasing after people who can't see your value. Because when you know your purpose, rejection doesn't wound you. It redirects you. Purpose makes a man dangerous, not in a destructive way, but in a disciplined way. Because when you have a mission, you stop being easily controlled. You stop playing small. You stop letting emotions or other people's opinions dictate your path. You become focused, precise, intentional. Every decision serves your direction. Every moment builds momentum. And that's when you become unstoppable. But finding purpose requires stillness. It requires self-awareness and honesty. You have to ask yourself hard questions. What do I believe in? What kind of man do I want to become? What impact do I want to leave behind? Most men never ask those questions because it's easier to distract themselves with validation. But the truth is, validation is temporary. Purpose is eternal. The man who chooses purpose might walk alone for a while, but he walks in power. Purpose also demands sacrifice. You can't chase your mission and comfort at the same time. You'll lose people. You'll face criticism. You'll doubt yourself. But that's part of the process. Because the path to purpose isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about becoming the kind of man who's disciplined enough to stay focused, no matter who walks away. When you lead with purpose, validation stops controlling you. You don't need approval to make decisions. You don't need permission to move forward. You stop waiting for people to see your worth because you're too busy living it. You understand that not everyone will understand your mission. And that's okay. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be effective. A man with purpose doesn't need to tell people who he is. His consistency reveals it. His focus demands it. His actions prove it. And that's what women respect. Not talk, not charm, but direction. They respect the man who knows where he's going and doesn't get lost trying to please everyone along the way. Purpose gives you standards. It keeps you from settling. It teaches you that your life is too valuable to be wasted on things that don't move you forward. The man with purpose doesn't chase every opportunity, every woman, every distraction. He's selective not because he's arrogant, but because he understands the cost of his energy. When you put purpose first, validation loses its power. People's opinions become background noise. Approval becomes irrelevant because the man who knows his mission doesn't need the world to believe in him. He just needs to keep building. And eventually, his results will speak for him. Every great man learns this truth. Validation fades, but legacy remains. The applause you chase today will be forgotten tomorrow. But the purpose you commit to, the work you build, the example you set, the integrity you live by, that's what endures. So if you want to be respected, stop chasing validation and start pursuing purpose. Don't live for applause, live for alignment. Don't seek to be liked. Seek to be legendary. Because in the end, women and the world don't follow the man who wants attention. They follow the man who has direction. There's a misconception about strength, that it's about domination, control, or emotional detachment. Society often tells men that, to be strong, they must be unfeeling, cold, and stoic to the point of numbness. But that's not real strength. That's suppression. True strength isn't about how much you can suppress, it's about how much you can handle without losing composure. Emotional maturity is what separates a man who just looks strong from a man who truly is strong. Because without emotional intelligence, strength is just force, and force without control eventually destroys everything it touches. You can have muscles, money, and confidence, but if you can't manage your emotions, you'll still be weak. You'll explode when criticized, you'll shut down when rejected, you'll lash out when disrespected. And that's not power. That's reactivity. Real power is calm. Real power is measured. Real power is when you can feel deeply but still act wisely. A woman doesn't respect a man who loses control when things don't go his way. She doesn't respect a man who tries to intimidate to feel powerful. She respects the man who can stay composed in chaos, the one who can express emotion without being ruled by it. That kind of control doesn't come from ego. It comes from awareness. Emotional maturity is about knowing your triggers, understanding your patterns, and learning to pause before you react. It's realizing that not every insult deserves a reaction, not every emotion deserves expression, and not every situation requires your dominance. It's about having the strength to choose restraint over reaction, clarity over chaos. The emotionally immature man constantly seeks control over others. The emotionally mature man seeks control over himself. Because he knows that mastery of others is temporary, but mastery of self is eternal. He doesn't need to win every argument, prove every point or always be right. He knows that silence can be louder than words, and calm can be stronger than aggression. When you develop emotional maturity, you start to notice patterns, not just in others but in yourself. You realize that most of your frustrations come from unmet expectations, not actual problems. You realize that your anger often hides fear, that your defensiveness hides insecurity, that your pride hides pain. And once you understand that, you stop fighting the world and start working on yourself. That's the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is impulsive. It's driven by ego, emotion, or fear. Response is intentional. It's guided by awareness and purpose. When a man learns to respond instead of react, he becomes unshakable. He stops being a victim of his emotions and starts being a master of them. Emotional maturity doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful in a way few people understand. It allows you to stay grounded when others lose control. It allows you to lead with empathy without losing authority. It allows you to connect deeply without being consumed by attachment. Because emotional maturity is not about being less emotional, it's about being emotionally disciplined. And women notice that. They notice the difference between a man who panics and a man who pauses, between a man who blames and a man who reflects, between a man who needs to be right and a man who needs to understand. That difference is respect. Because a woman doesn't feel safe with a man who can't manage himself, but she deeply respects the one who can. The truth is, emotional maturity is built in silence. It's built in the moments when you choose not to send that angry message, not to respond to disrespect with ego, not to match someone's chaos with your own. It's built in the small moments, when you regulate instead of retaliate, and every time you do, you reinforce your inner strength. When a man develops emotional maturity, he doesn't get manipulated easily. People can't control him with guilt or provoke him with disrespect. He becomes emotionally sovereign, in control of his peace, his reactions, and his energy. He understands that walking away from chaos isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's protection. Because not every battle deserves your presence. A lot of men think that showing emotion is a sign of weakness. But in truth, avoiding emotion is fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of being seen. Real men don't hide behind stoicism. They use emotion as information, not identity. They feel deeply, but act deliberately. They can cry without collapsing, love without losing themselves, and forgive without forgetting their worth. And here's the paradox: the more emotionally mature you become, the less reactive you are, and the more respect you command. Because respect grows where trust lives, and people trust those who stay steady. When you're emotionally stable, you become the calm in the storm. You become the man people turn to when things fall apart. Not because you're louder, but because you're centered. Emotional maturity also protects your relationships. It teaches you how to communicate without aggression, how to set boundaries without hostility, how to express disappointment without destruction. You stop seeing conflict as a threat and start seeing it as a conversation. You stop shutting down or lashing out. Instead, you listen, reflect, and respond with intention. And that's when relationships start to deepen. Because connection doesn't come from constant harmony, it comes from navigating tension with respect. Strength without sensitivity is fragile. It's the kind of strength that breaks under pressure, that turns into control, manipulation, or silence. But strength with sensitivity, that's the foundation of real masculinity. It's the balance between power and presence, authority and empathy, confidence and compassion. It's not about dominating others, it's about mastering yourself. When a man can combine his strength with emotional awareness, he becomes magnetic. He doesn't need to demand respect, his energy commands it. He doesn't need to force authority, his calmness embodies it. He doesn't need to pretend to be invincible, his vulnerability makes him real. And in that authenticity, he finds freedom. Being emotionally mature doesn't mean you don't feel anger or sadness. It means you don't let those emotions drive your behavior. It means you can stand in your feelings without being drowned by them. It means you can be soft when needed and firm when required. It means you understand that emotional control isn't suppression. It's strategy. So many men confuse silence with strength, but silence out of fear isn't control. Real control is choosing when to speak and when to walk away. It's knowing that your peace is too valuable to be sacrificed for temporary validation. It's understanding that you can't fix every situation, but you can always manage your response to it. The man who is emotionally mature doesn't need to dominate a room to command it. His energy does that for him. He's calm, centered, and self-assured. People respect him because he respects himself. He doesn't run from emotion. He uses it as power. He doesn't let chaos consume him. He becomes the order within it. That's emotional maturity, not weakness disguised as toughness, but awareness disguised as power. Because strength without sensitivity might get attention, but strength with sensitivity earns respect. And that's the kind of strength that lasts, the kind that builds trust, love, and legacy. Integrity. It's one of those words that gets thrown around a lot. People like the way it sounds, but very few truly live by it. Integrity isn't a performance, and it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent, doing what's right even when it's not easy, even when no one's watching, even when it costs you something. Integrity is the foundation of real respect, because it's the one trait you can't fake for long. People can sense when your words and your actions don't align. They might not say it out loud, but they feel it. And once they do, trust begins to crumble. A man with integrity stands out, not because he's louder than everyone else, but because he's solid. His words carry weight. His promises mean something. When he says he's going to do something, people know it's as good as done. They don't have to question his motives because his character has already spoken for him. That's the kind of strength that can't be built overnight. It's built through repetition, through thousands of small decisions that nobody sees. Integrity is rare because it's uncomfortable. It asks you to choose the harder road, to walk away from shortcuts, to tell the truth when it's inconvenient, to stay loyal when it's easier not to. It's not glamorous. It doesn't always get applause, but it builds something far more powerful than attention. It builds respect. In a world obsessed with image, integrity is rebellion. Everyone wants to look honest, humble, and authentic, but few are willing to live it when it costs them approval. A man of integrity doesn't say what people want to hear. He says what's true. He doesn't pretend to be strong. He becomes strong by standing in his truth. That's why integrity commands respect, because it's rare, and rarity always carries value. People respect consistency more than charisma. You can be charming for a night, impressive for a moment, but if your actions don't match your words, it won't last. Integrity is what sustains respect when the excitement fades. It's what keeps people trusting you when things go wrong. It's what separates a man who leads from a man who just performs. Integrity doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes. It means when you do, you own them. You don't shift blame. You don't hide behind excuses. You face it. You make it right, because integrity isn't about never falling. It's about always standing back up in truth. When you live that way, people begin to see something in you that's becoming increasingly rare: authenticity. The truth is, women deeply respect a man with integrity, because integrity makes her feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. She knows he means what he says. She knows he won't play games or manipulate to get what he wants. She knows he can be trusted, not because he promises loyalty, but because he lives it. Integrity builds stability. It creates predictability in a world that's constantly shifting. When a man has integrity, people know what to expect from him. His word becomes a contract. His behavior becomes reliable. And reliability, that quiet, steady dependability, is one of the most powerful forms of respect you can earn. But integrity is tested in private. It's easy to look honorable when others are watching. The real test comes when you're alone, when you could lie, cut corners, or take advantage and no one would ever know. That's when character reveals itself. The man who chooses honesty in those moments builds inner strength that no one can take away. He becomes unbreakable because his sense of self isn't dependent on image, it's rooted in truth. Integrity also means aligning your actions with your principles, even when it costs you relationships or opportunities. You can't claim to value respect and still disrespect others. You can't say you want loyalty while being dishonest. You can't talk about leadership while breaking your own rules. Integrity demands alignment. Your beliefs, your behavior, your words and your actions, all moving in the same direction. A man without integrity might win, temporarily. He might charm people, impress them, or get what he wants in the short term. But long term, he loses everything, because once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. People might forgive you, but they won't forget. They'll always wonder if your words are real this time, and that doubt is poison to respect. Integrity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It's quiet confidence. It's knowing that you don't have to prove who you are. Your consistency already has. And that quiet consistency makes people listen when you speak, because they know you don't talk carelessly. You talk with intention. Integrity also means keeping your standards high, not just in how you treat others, but in how you treat yourself. It's easy to demand loyalty, respect, and honesty from others. But are you loyal to your own goals? Do you respect your own time? Are you honest about your own weaknesses? Because integrity starts with self-respect. You can't live with integrity if you're constantly betraying your own potential. A man with integrity doesn't gossip, doesn't manipulate, doesn't cheat the system. He doesn't try to win through deception because he knows that every dishonest victory costs a piece of his soul. He doesn't settle for easy wins. He builds real ones. And that's why people trust him, because they know he plays fair. And more importantly, he plays for something bigger than ego. In leadership, integrity is the anchor. When everything falls apart, when emotions run high, when people panic, it's integrity that keeps you centered. It keeps you from cutting corners, from compromising your values for convenience. It reminds you that doing the right thing is rarely the fastest route, but it's always the surest one. And integrity always pays back. Maybe not instantly, but eventually. It builds your reputation, your relationships, and your legacy. Because long after people forget what you said or what you did, they'll remember how you showed up. They'll remember how your presence made them feel safe, how your word made them believe again, how your example inspired them to raise their own standards. That's the power of integrity. It's not glamorous. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't need to be advertised. It's built in the shadows, proven in the light. It's the quiet backbone behind every respected man. The unseen force that earns trust, commands respect, and sustains greatness. So if you want to be respected, don't chase perfection. Chase integrity. Don't aim to be impressive. Aim to be consistent. Don't worry about being liked. Worry about being trustworthy. Because when your word becomes truth, your presence becomes power. Integrity is not something you talk about. It's something you live. It's how you walk when no one's watching, how you speak when there's nothing to gain, how you treat others when you don't need them. That's what defines a real man. Not the titles, not the trophies, not the attention, but the unwavering commitment to truth, even when it's hard. In the end, integrity is the invisible armor that protects your respect, your peace, and your purpose. Lose it, and nothing else will hold. Keep it, and even in silence, your name will carry weight. Because a man of integrity doesn't need to demand respect. He becomes it. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you embody. You can't buy it, you can't fake it, and you can't chase it. Real respect is born from discipline, character, and truth. It comes from how you live when no one is watching, how you carry yourself when no one believes in you, and how you respond when life tests your strength. Every man wants to be respected, but few are willing to do what it takes to earn it. Respect is not built in the moments when things are easy. It's forged in the moments when you could compromise, but don't. When you could react, but choose control. When you could give up, but decide to rise. That's when the world starts to take you seriously. That's when people start to feel your presence instead of just seeing it. You have to understand something. Women don't respect titles, looks, or empty confidence. They respect energy. They respect certainty. They respect a man who knows who he is, where he's going, and what he stands for. The kind of man who doesn't need to be loud to be heard or aggressive to be strong. The man whose silence carries weight because it's backed by truth. And truth, your truth, is your power. Because when you live in alignment with it, you stop needing validation from anyone. You stop performing. You stop chasing. You stop bending. You start becoming. You start living with a sense of direction that no rejection can shake and no disrespect can touch. You become the kind of man who doesn't have to prove his worth. He shows it through how he lives. There's a shift that happens when you stop trying to be respected and start acting like someone who deserves respect. Your words get quieter, your actions get sharper, your energy gets calmer. You stop reacting to everything around you because you've built something stronger within you. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself, it radiates. The truth is, every man has a choice. You can live chasing approval, changing who you are to fit the moment, shrinking yourself to be accepted. Or you can stand firm in your truth, lead with purpose, set boundaries, and build yourself into a man whose respect is non-negotiable. One road gives you temporary comfort, the other gives you lifelong power. And here's the real secret. When you stop chasing respect and start living with integrity, purpose, and emotional strength, everything changes. The right people start gravitating toward you. The wrong ones fall away. Your relationships deepen. Your confidence grows. Your peace expands. You stop needing to control others because you've mastered control over yourself. That's what real strength looks like. Not dominance. Not intimidation, but calm power. Power rooted in discipline, integrity, and self-awareness. The kind of power that can walk away from chaos and still remain centered. The kind that doesn't seek validation, but naturally earns admiration. So if you want to be the kind of man that women truly respect, the kind of man that people trust, follow, and remember, stop trying to appear strong. Start becoming solid. Live your truth, even when it's hard. Stand your ground, even when it's lonely. Keep your word, even when no one's watching. Because that's where real respect is born. Not in how loud you speak, but in how consistently you live. Be the man who leads himself first, who doesn't flinch under pressure, who knows his worth without proving it, who walks in quiet confidence. That's the kind of man who doesn't demand respect, because he already is and once you become that man, you won't have to chase anything. Not validation, not acceptance, not love, because everything real will start chasing you.